The door to my new beach house swung open with a soft creak, and there they were, two faces I hadn't seen in 12 long years. My daughter Caroline and her husband Stephen stood on the porch, their smiles tense and barely hiding the desperation in their eyes. Behind me stretched the endless ocean, the horizon painted in vivid blues, framed perfectly by the glass walls of my living room. Inside, sunlight danced across polished marble floors. The Italian leather sofa gleamed, and the carefully curated artwork added to the serene elegance of the space. It was a far cry from the cramped apartment where I had spent countless lonely evenings. Caroline's voice quivered as she spoke. "Mom, we need to talk." That single word carried 12 years of unspoken pain. 12 Christmases without an invitation. 12 birthdays without a call. 12 years in which they had erased me from their lives, as though I had never existed. I studied them closely, etching every detail into memory. Caroline wore a faded dress, its fabric worn and soft with age. Her shoes were cracked, telling stories of miles walked and struggles endured. Her hands twisted nervously, betraying the fragile composure she tried to project. Stephen, in contrast, moved with forced assurance, straightening the collar of a rumpled shirt. His eyes flitted past me, scanning the room as though appraising its worth. For a long moment, I said nothing. Outside, the waves whispered against the shore, a steady rhythm reminding me that my life had already found peace long before they reappeared. Finally, I stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. "Come in," I said evenly. "After 12 years of silence, let's hear what you have to say." Long before this moment, long before the soft knock at my door, there was another life. A life where Caroline was the center of my world, where laughter filled our small kitchen and weekends were filled with phone calls and visits. But that life ended the day she met Stephen Turner. At first, he was all charm and politeness. He called me Mrs. Lockwood with a smile that never reached his eyes. He praised my holiday meals, pulled out chairs at the table, and spoke as if he had nothing but good intentions. But beneath the veneer of courtesy lay something darker, something I would only understand much later. Slowly, he began building invisible barriers between Caroline and me. When she mentioned visiting on the weekend, Stephen suddenly remembered work emergencies, or insisted they had other plans. If I called to hear her voice, he often answered, his tone clipped, promising she would call back. Rarely did she. Invitations disappeared. Messages went unanswered. My presence in their lives was erased quietly, not with shouting or conflict, but through subtle silences. At first, it felt accidental. I wasn't invited to Caroline's MBA graduation. "Mom, we thought you had other plans," she said with a nervous laugh. When she had her first child, I waited for a baby shower invite, only to be told it was very small, just a few college friends. My heart broke, but I smiled, nodded, and said I understood. Excuses piled up until a wall rose between us that I could no longer cross. Holidays were the sharpest sting. Thanksgiving passed with Caroline's voice telling me, "It'll just be the four of us this year." Christmas came and went. The children claimed to be sick. Birthdays were suddenly impossible because of Stephen's work. Every time she said, "Next time, Mom," there was no next time. I spent those years cooking for one, setting a single plate at the table, pretending not to notice the empty chairs. On my birthday, I bought a small cake from the corner bakery, lit a candle, and whispered wishes into the empty room. My phone stayed silent. My apartment echoed with loneliness. In the quietest hours, I kept asking myself, how did I lose my daughter? What did I do that made her decide I no longer belonged in her life? When the silence became unbearable, I faced a choice: drown in sorrow or find a way to survive. I chose survival. My savings were nearly gone, and rent for my tiny apartment climbed every year. So I returned to what had always comforted me: baking. I began selling pies, cakes, and cookies at the town's farmers market every Sunday. At first, standing under the blazing sun, hands rough from kneading dough, offering desserts to strangers felt humiliating. But over time, I discovered something unexpected. Strangers valued me more than my own family had. They smiled when they tasted my pies, praised the flaky crusts, and returned week after week. Their gratitude reminded me that I still had worth. Every day blended into a familiar rhythm. Mondays meant baking apple pies. Tuesdays were reserved for chocolate fudge cakes, and Wednesdays filled my small kitchen with the sweet aroma of muffins. I rose before dawn, hoisted heavy baskets brimming with my creations, and trudged to the market, shoulders aching but spirit unyielding. By the time Sunday evening rolled around, I had sold enough to cover the bills and stock up on ingredients for the next week. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was at that market that I met Helen Carter, a widow in her 70s who bought 3 pies every week. 1 for herself, 2 for her neighbors. Her own children hardly called, much like mine. Over cups of coffee, we exchanged stories of abandonment and the quiet loneliness of being overlooked by those who had once depended on us. Helen's laughter always carried a hint of sorrow. I understood. Children, once they have families of their own, seem to forget their parents. Parents don't matter anymore, she'd say, until they need something. Then suddenly, they remember we exist. Her words echoed in my mind week after week as I returned to my modest apartment. Pie boxes empty, but heart quietly strengthened. She was right. Parents like us faded into invisibility until convenience reminded others of our presence. The sting of that truth fueled me. If Caroline and Stephen had erased me from their lives, I would carve out a new story, 1 pie, 1 cake, 1 Sunday at a time. Life continued in this steady cadence until a single phone call shattered it, rewriting my future entirely. The call came from a lawyer in California. His tone was formal, measured, but the news he carried hit me like lightning. My Aunt Agnes Whitmore, the quiet, distant relative who had left for America decades ago, had passed away, leaving everything to me. At first, I thought there had been some mistake. Aunt Agnes had always been a name whispered in family conversations. A few Christmas cards, a photograph faded to sepia, and stories of her bold move west were all I remembered. Yet here was a stranger, telling me that she had not only lived well but amassed a fortune, and she had chosen me, the niece she had quietly watched from afar, to inherit it. The inheritance was staggering. A home in Los Angeles worth over $1 million. Bank accounts filled with savings and investments worth even more. More wealth than I had ever dreamed of touching. My knees shook as I held the phone like a lifeline. For so long, I had counted coins to buy flour and sugar. And now I was a millionaire. But the money wasn't what moved me most. It was the letter Aunt Agnes left behind. In her shaky handwriting, she had watched my struggles, my loneliness, and the quiet strength I carried. Marion, she wrote, I want you to live your final years as the queen you always were, not the beggar they tried to make you. With that inheritance, I bought my dream beach house. Each morning, the sound of waves replaced the hum of traffic. Sunlight filled the kitchen where I brewed my coffee. I walked along the shoreline at dusk, letting the tide wash away decades of sorrow. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from loneliness, free from financial fear, free from the invisible chains my daughter's rejection had wrapped around me. 3 months after moving in, when the sea breeze had become my constant companion, the past came knocking. It was a quiet afternoon when I heard the knock on the heavy oak door. I opened it to find Caroline and Stephen. Time had not been kind. Caroline's once bright eyes were shadowed. Her hair, once styled, hung limp. Her dress seemed worn thin from repeated washings. Her shoes cracked and peeling. Her hands trembled as she clutched her purse, as if even that small possession could slip away. Stephen tried to carry himself with confidence, but it was brittle. His shirt wrinkled, the collar frayed. He shifted uneasily, eyes darting past me, scanning the furniture, the polished marble floor, the art on the walls, lingering on the ocean view as if calculating its worth. Mom, Caroline whispered, voice trembling. We need to talk. Simple words, but they cut deep. 12 years of silence. No calls, no messages. Only the occasional obligatory text. And now, suddenly, they wanted to talk. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the living room. They entered cautiously, eyes widening at every detail. The cream-colored leather sofa, the glass coffee table, the polished wood shelves lined with books. All of it seemed to overwhelm them. Caroline followed Stephen like a shadow, head bowed. He, however, surveyed the room with the greedy curiosity of a man assessing opportunity. "Sit down," I said softly, indicating the sofa that likely cost more than they earned in a year. My voice was calm, though my heart beat with a mix of anger and clarity. I knew why they were here. From the moment I saw their faces, I understood. They hadn't come for love. They hadn't come for reconciliation. They had come because, finally, they needed something from me. We sat in the living room, the sound of waves faint through open windows. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Stephen cleared his throat, attempting composure. "Marion," he began, "we know it's been a few years since we last spoke." 12 years, I interrupted, voice firm. "Not a few. 12 years since you decided I didn't exist." The color drained from Caroline's face, tears filling her eyes. But I felt no urge to comfort her. I had cried alone too many times. "Mom, it wasn't meant to be like that," she whispered. "Things just got complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, bitter. "Complicated was missing your graduation, because you assumed I had other plans. Complicated was being left out of your baby shower because it was just friends from college. Complicated was 12 Christmases spent cooking for one, blowing out birthday candles alone." Stephen shifted, hands clasped, feigning sincerity. "Families sometimes need space to grow. It was nothing personal against you." The laugh that escaped me was sharp, almost startling. "Nothing personal. You erased me from your lives. You denied your children the love of a grandmother who, you would have cherished them. And instead, you left me questioning if I had failed as a mother. And now, after 12 years, you show up to tell me it was nothing personal." Caroline broke, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders trembled with quiet sobs. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have called. I should have fought harder. But Stephen said it was better for the marriage if we kept our distance. He said, mothers-in-law always cause problems." "And you believed him?" I said flatly. "You believed him because it was easier than defending me. You chose silence over love." The room thickened with truth. Stephen shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of irritation crossing his face, as if my words had pierced his carefully constructed mask. I leaned forward, voice calm but unwavering. "Do you know what it felt like, Caroline? To watch families in the park, grandparents with their grandchildren, while I sat alone on Christmas Eve with a store-bought cake because my daughter thought I wasn't worth an invitation. Do you know how many nights I stayed awake wondering what I did wrong?" Caroline couldn't answer, her sobs only deepening. Stephen finally lost his patience. "We can't change the past," he muttered. "We're here now." "That should mean something," I said, meeting his eyes. "You're here because your life is unraveling. Not because you suddenly remembered you had a mother. You're here because you need something, not because you love me. And that, Stephen, counts for nothing." The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Caroline dabbed at her eyes with a crumpled tissue. Stephen leaned forward, shifting tactics. His tone softened, but his eyes revealed calculation. "Marion," he began slowly, "we know mistakes were made, but the children are innocent. They shouldn't suffer for adult decisions. Don't they deserve to know their grandmother?" There it was, the card he had been holding close. The grandchildren, the ultimate leverage. His words sounded like concern, but I heard manipulation in every syllable. This wasn't about love. It was about control. Caroline looked up, tear-streaked. "They ask about you, Mom. They see other kids with their grandparents and wonder why they don't have the same." Her voice cracked. For a moment, I almost wavered. Almost. But Helen's words from the farmer's market rang in my mind. Children often return to parents not out of love, but convenience. I'd seen it too often. The timing of this visit spoke louder than any tears. "You speak of the children now," I said, calm but firm. "But where were you when they were born? Where was I when they took their first steps? When they lost their first teeth? Started school? Celebrated birthdays? You denied them a grandmother for 12 years, not by their choice, but by yours." Caroline sobbed, her voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting my marriage. Stephen said it was for the best. Of course he did. He saw my love as interference, my presence as a threat, and you let him convince you." Stephen shifted, uneasy, but remained silent. For the first time, his mask slipped. I leaned back, voice steady. Do not try to soften my heart with talk of innocent children. You decided they didn't need a grandmother until now, until you were desperate. Love that surfaces only in crisis isn't love. It's convenience, and I will not let convenience dictate my worth. Stephen's composure cracked at last, jaw tightening, voice sharp. This is ridiculous, Mary. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Families fight. Families drift apart. Now we're trying to fix it, and you just keep digging up the past. Impatience, not remorse, dripped from his words. That tone was familiar. The same condescension I'd felt when he first pulled Caroline away from me. Caroline flinched. Stephen, please, she whispered, but he ignored her. I sat straighter, deliberate. The past isn't a pile of forgotten arguments, Stephen. The past is 12 years of silence, 12 years of rejection, 12 years of watching my daughter become a stranger. That isn't something I can just sweep aside because you feel uncomfortable. Caroline's sobs filled the room, each one heavier than the last. She finally looked at me, red and swollen-eyed. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have called. I let him convince me you were the problem when all you ever wanted was to love me and the kids. Her confession should have softened me, but 12 years of delay had poisoned its timing. You're right, I said quietly. You let him convince you. And now you want me to believe this sudden realization is about love, not about money. Tell me, Caroline, why now? After all these years, she opened her mouth, but no words came. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could say. Stephen's face darkened, frustration rising. He stood abruptly, voice loud. Enough with this guilt trip, Marion. We didn't come here to be humiliated. We came because we need help. If you truly cared about family, you'd stop punishing us and do the right thing. I rose slowly, eyes unwavering. The right thing, Stephen, is to tell the truth. You didn't come for love. You came for money. And that is where this conversation ends. For the first time that afternoon, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. He knew he had lost control. The room remained tense, like a storm that had finally broken. Caroline slumped on the sofa, face buried in her hands. Stephen stood rigid, jaw tight, clearly calculating, but too shaken to speak. I walked to the wide glass doors leading to the terrace. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the sky gold and rose. Waves rolled in steady rhythm, a reminder of the life I had built without them. You should go, I said softly, not turning. This house is no longer a place for manipulation. I will not open my door to desperation disguised as love. Neither moved. Then Stephen exhaled in frustration and stormed toward the door. Caroline followed slowly, steps unsure, shoulders trembling with regret. She paused at the threshold as if to speak, but no words came. She slipped outside, and the door closed behind her. Silence filled the house, but it felt like freedom, not abandonment. I poured a glass of chilled white wine and stepped onto the terrace. The salty breeze brushed my face, and the horizon stretched endlessly before me. For the first time in years, I felt light. Later, I called Helen. Her warm voice carried understanding. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as we thought, I replied. They came for money, not love. And I finally feel free. Weeks passed, then months. The quiet rhythm of life returned. The farmers market ladies still visited on Sundays for coffee and pie. Helen and I continued our Wednesday gatherings, where laughter replaced sorrow. Life was simple, full, and the ocean reminded me daily that peace is priceless. One evening, a message lit up my phone. Caroline. Her words were short, without excuses or demands. Mom, I'm in therapy. I'm learning about boundaries and toxic relationships. I know I don't deserve a second chance yet, but I hope one day I can be the daughter you deserve. I love you. I read it twice before saving it. For the first time, her words carried no manipulation. But I didn't reply. Some wounds need time. Some bridges cannot be rebuilt with a single message. I set the phone down and stepped outside to watch the sunset. Waves whispered against the shore, steady and unending. For the first time in years, I felt not just free, but whole. Family should mean love, respect, and presence, not convenience. That is the lesson I carry with me, and the one I leave with you.